Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. A little bit of space news for you in this video. I'm going to begin with an interesting one coming from Mars. This Martian crater has a weirdly Earth-like secret. NASA's Mars rover Opportunity, which keeps on plugging, was exploring an uncharted Martian valley when it encountered a site that looks very familiar. Streams of rocks and gravel stretch down a hillside of what's called Perseverance Valley. A roughly 600 foot, about 183 meters, drop down the inner slope of a crater. And here's the interesting part. In seemingly organized rows. The patterns closely resemble so-called rock stripes seen on certain mountains on Earth. These formations usually result when wet soil freezes and thaws repeatedly over many years. So the implication is that this might be evidence, or further evidence, demonstrating the presence of water at some point in Mars history. Perseverance Valley is thought to have been carved hundreds of thousands of years ago by a combination of water, ice, and wind. Okay. The presence of these newly discovered stripes gives us more questions for scientists to answer. The rock stripes of Perseverance Valley closely resemble stripes seen inside the cone of Hawaii's Mauna Kea volcano. Excuse me. Yeah, Mauna Kea volcano. So these stripes there look a lot like the stripes seen inside Hawaii's Mauna Kea volcano. There the stripes form, in white, when fine-grained soil freezes overnight and expands, pushing up larger chunks of rock on either side. After the soil thaws in the morning, wind and gravity gradually move these larger stones downslope from the moist, fine-grained segments. Researchers don't yet know how these patterns came to appear in a Martian crater, but there are a few hypotheses. One leading explanation involves the planet's obliquity, or the tilt of Mars' equator relative to its orbit, which is thought to alter significantly over hundreds of thousands of years. Earth itself has a tilt to its axis, which goes from about 23.5 degrees to about anywhere 24.5 to 26.5 degrees. And that's typically over a period of about, 40,000 years? Part of Milankovitch hypothesis. I have to check on this now. It's either 40,000 to 27,000. There's a change in sequence from North Star, from Polaris to Phoebus to Vega, and so forth. And that's either 27,000 years, and the tilt of the axis is 40,000 years, or it's reversed. I think I'm right the first time. I think it's 40,000 years, and the movement of the North Star for Earth is about 27,000 years. There's changes in the eccentricity of Earth's orbit, which is going from nearly circular to a little more elliptical, and that is a 100,000 year cycle. That I am certain of. But anyway, going back to this story, the changes in the planet's obliquity is a hypothesis for how these features can appear on the surface. Because if the planet's obliquity were to change enough, water currently frozen at the poles could vaporize in the atmosphere and turn to snow or frost closer to the equator. Another possible explanation is these stripes are relics from a time of greater obliquity, when snowpacks on the rim of the valley seasonally melted enough to moisten the soil. And then we have our freeze-thaw cycle. Of course, further study is necessary to provide any more answers for us. Okay? And Opportunity, of course, will keep on plugging, as it's been just a super little workhorse out there. Our next astronomical news involves the most powerful supernova ever. An extraordinarily powerful superluminous supernova. or SLSN for short, occurred 10.5 billion, that's billion with a B, years ago. It's the most distant star explosion ever observed. And when you consider that the Big Bang is estimated to have taken place about 13.8 billion years ago, this is not too long after that event. So in other words, the light from this SLSN has been moving through space about 3/4 of the universe's existence. So what are SLSNs? Well, as the name suggests, these are objects of extreme versions of normal supernovas. Several different phenomena may trigger these events, including the infall of material onto neutron stars, which are rapidly rotating remnants of once massive stars. Okay. This supernova was discovered by Matthew Smith of the University of Southampton in England. And he said it is an extremely distant, extremely bright, and extremely rare. The UV light, ultraviolet light from SLSN informs us of the amount of metal produced in the explosion and the temperature of the explosion itself, both of which are key to understanding what causes and drives such cosmic explosions. Of course, the data is still being analyzed, and you may recall that what takes place inside of stars, through the fusion reaction, that the elements fuse together to make heavier elements. A lot of these elements are the metals that we typically see, as well as carbon, the nonmetals, and metalloids, which are elements that have properties of metal and properties of nonmetals. So I did a video some time ago talking about how do we form the heavier elements, such as the gold and so forth, and I talked about that there, where they think it was the result of collisions of neutron stars, as opposed to the usual fusion process that takes place, leading up to, say, formation of lead and other not as heavy elements. Anyway, this report, this study, can be found in the Astrophysical Journal. The next story, involved from space, methane on Enceladus could indicate microbial life. Enceladus, of course, is a moon of Saturn. Some hardy microbes could likely survive in the Saturn moon Enceladus buried ocean. There they could be utilizing hydrogen that may be produced by the interaction between seawater and rock, and this new study suggests that. The microbes tested in the study churn out methane as a metabolic byproduct. Now, such microbes are typically referred to as methanogens, meaning that they use methane in their physiological process. And now this is interesting. So let's back up a bit. So wait a second. Are we saying we found microbes in Enceladus? No, we're not saying that. What they did was scientists have studied microbes, methanogens, under laboratory settings and observed what they produce, what their biochemical processes are, and so forth. So they're basically extrapolating, which is typical for the exobiology field to do. You run experiments and then you extrapolate, and the experiments that are run are based on observed conditions outside of Earth. This is intriguing because NASA's Cassini spacecraft detected methane in the plume of particles that were blasted out into space by geysers from Enceladus. Okay. Geysers that were located at the south pole of Enceladus. We are able to show under putative, in other words, what they think are the prevailing conditions on Enceladus, biological methane production occurs in the lab. So based on what they know to be the conditions found on Enceladus, they're able to show methane production. This is a statement by Simon Rittman of the Department of Ecogenomics and Systems Biology at the University of Vienna in Austria. Hence, some of the methane detected on Enceladus could, in principle, be of biological origin. It does not necessarily mean it is of biological origin. Now, the research is led by Ruth Sophie Taubner, also of the University of Vienna. Okay. So, Simon Rittman was a co-author. The principal investigator is Ruth Sophie Taubner. They performed initial experiments on 3 species of methane-producing archaean microbes. Archaea are similar to bacteria in that they lack a nucleus or any other membrane-bound internal structures, typically called prokaryotes, versus eukaryotes, which are the cells found in multicellular organisms where there's a defined nucleus surrounded by a nuclear membrane. We have organelles such as lysosome, mitochondria, ribosomes, etc., endoplasmic reticulum. Such structures, typically, there may be ribosomoid-like structures in bacteria, but they do not have mitochondria, they do not have lysosomes, they do not have cell organelles. So this exploratory work identified one of the microbes, Methanothermococcus okinawensis, there's a mouthful, as the best suited for more in-depth study under Enceladus-like conditions. So the team exposed Methanothermococcus okinawensis to a variety of gas compositions and relatively high pressures at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 65 degrees Celsius. Typically, these are the conditions you would expect to find at hydrothermal vents on what they would think would be Enceladus seafloor. Now, Earth itself has hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. For example, the well-known Juan de Fuca region off the Washington and Vancouver coastlines, Vancouver Island, is host to a lot of hydrothermal vents, and there we see lots of methanogens and other organisms that undergo what's called chemosynthesis as opposed to photosynthesis, where they use chemical energy to create food versus light energy that we typically are familiar with here on the surface. So there's a whole ecosystem there based on chemosynthetic organisms. Those are your primary producers, leading to primary and secondary consumers, and so forth. Astronomers have inferred the existence of such vents on Enceladus from several Cassini observations. So this begs the question, or at least goes to answer, how do they know these conditions are there? Well, they're basing it on information that Cassini has found for us. For example, Cassini spotted tiny silica particles and molecular hydrogen, H2, in the moon's plume, both of which are best explained by reactions between hot water and rock. Going back to Earth as an example, at the hydrothermal vents, we have hot water, superheated hot water emerging out of the crust. Because of the intense pressure, that water is a liquid. The intense pressure keeps it as a liquid. The temperature is so high that if it was at sea level, it would be a vapor. But the intense pressure of the deep sea keeps it as a liquid, called superheated water under high pressure. And typically what we see, because of the activities of the methanogens in near the hydrothermal vent, we see hydrogen sulfide in the plume. And when the plumes coming out of hydrothermal vents on the Earth, when they move a distance away and interact with the cold oceanic water, they precipitate out. And we see what we call black chimneys, which are basically deposits of hydrogen sulfide. So they're suspecting something similar happening here. M. okinawensis grew well and produced methane in the team's experiments, which perhaps isn't surprising, given that the organism was isolated from a hydrothermal vent off the Japanese island of Okinawa at a depth of 3,200 feet. Okay. In addition Taubner and her colleagues modeled the water-rock reactions likely occurring in Enceladus interior. They found that such reactions are likely producing plenty of hydrogen gas, enough to sustain methanogenic organisms, if any exist on the Saturn moon. To be clear, the study team members are not claiming that Enceladus methane is biological. After all, the substance can be produced geologically as well, reaction between rock and water, but the new results could help inform the search for life on ocean moons in the solar system. In other words, it may give us good indicators, good indications of where to search for extraterrestrial life, for microbes perhaps. This study is published in the February 27 edition of the journal Nature Communications. So I just wanted to bring you some stories from space, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that goes on there. If you like this, I hope you like the video. If you like the video, please share the video with others. Please go on social media, tell folks, tell your friends and all your contacts there of the work I do here. Have them check out my channel. Please subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that you'll get indications of when videos are dropped, when I drop videos in. I hope you will consider going to patreon.com / Science Talk with Jim Massa and become a subscriber and support the work I do here. If you're already a patron, I thank you for your continued support. Please help this channel grow. Please help spread the word of the work I do here. I present science, the facts. I am not sponsored by any corporations, so I am not forced to toe the line with any preconceived agenda. I report the facts to you. I give you my interpretation based on my training as a scientist and what the findings could possibly indicate. That's my purpose in doing this channel, is to bring to you the latest in science research, as well as give you my take on what the results indicate. Thank you for your time. Please support the work.